the first time someone told me not to look through the peephole after midnight. I laughed, not because it sounded funny, because it sounded stupid. I had only lived in the building for 3 days, and already people were acting strange around me. Nobody talked much. Nobody stayed in the hallways longer than necessary. And after around 11 at night, the entire building became unnaturally quiet. Not normal quiet. The kind of silence where you suddenly notice your own breathing. The apartment complex itself was old. 6 floors, long narrow hallways, buzzing lights, cheap rent. Exactly the kind of place people move into when life isn't going very well. For me, it wasn't really a choice. A few months earlier, I lost my job after the company I worked for shut down. Then my girlfriend left. Then my savings disappeared faster than I expected. By the time I found the apartment, I was desperate enough not to ask questions. The landlord barely even looked at me during the tour. He unlocked the apartment door, handed me the keys, and said something that felt strange even at the time. If something happens at night, ignore it. I remember laughing awkwardly after he said that. He didn't. At the time, I assumed he meant noisy neighbors. I wish that's all it was. The first 2 nights were normal. Mostly unpacking boxes, eating takeout, trying not to think about how badly my life had fallen apart. Then on the 3rd night, I met the man from apartment 204. I was coming back from the convenience store around 11:30 p.m. when I saw him standing near the mailboxes smoking a cigarette. Older guy, maybe late 50s. Heavy eye bags, nervous hands. He watched me walk into the lobby like he'd been waiting for someone. Then he asked, "You're in 217, right?" I nodded, and the moment I answered, his expression changed. Not surprise, more like concern. He glanced toward the elevator cameras before speaking again. "Listen carefully," he said quietly. "If you hear knocking tonight, don't look through the peephole." I remember staring at him, waiting for him to smile, or laugh, or explain the joke. But he didn't. He just stood there smoking, completely serious. I asked him what he meant. He shook his head immediately. "Doesn't matter," he said. "Just don't do it." Then he crushed the cigarette under his shoe, turned around, and walked away without another word. I stood there for a few seconds, wondering what the hell that was supposed to mean. Some kind of building prank maybe, or maybe the guy was mentally unstable. Honestly, I forgot about the conversation almost immediately, until that night. Around 12:10 a.m., I noticed the building had gone completely silent. Not quieter. Silent. No TVS, no footsteps, no plumbing sounds. Nothing. It felt wrong immediately because the walls in that building were thin. Usually you could hear everything, but suddenly, it was like every person around me had disappeared at the exact same time. Then something even stranger happened. The hallway lights outside my apartment turned off all at once. I know because the light under my front door vanished instantly. At first I thought the power went out, but my apartment still had electricity. The kitchen light worked, the TV worked, everything inside was normal. Only the hallway had gone dark, and that was the moment I remembered what the man downstairs told me. Almost immediately after that, I heard the first knock, not on my door, farther down the hallway. 3 slow knocks, then silence. A few seconds later, another set of knocks, closer this time. I muted the TV and listened carefully. The knocking continued. Always 3 knocks, always followed by silence. And every time it happened, it sounded closer. I remember standing in the middle of my apartment, trying to convince myself it was just another tenant messing around. But deep down, something already felt wrong. The pattern was too deliberate. Knock, silence. Knock, silence. Slowly moving through the hallway, like someone checking every apartment one by one. Then suddenly, it stopped, directly outside my door. I froze immediately. The silence outside felt heavy, like someone was standing inches away from the other side listening, waiting. I told myself not to move, not to make noise. And for almost a full minute, nothing happened. Then came the 3 knocks, right in front of me, slow, calm, almost polite. I felt this horrible pressure build in my chest. Not fear exactly, more like instinct, like every part of my body suddenly understood. I should not open that door. And then, very slowly, something scratched against the outside of the peephole, very slowly, like fingernails dragging across metal. I couldn't move. I just stood there staring at the door while the scratching continued for several seconds. Then suddenly, it stopped. The silence afterward felt even worse, because now I knew something was still standing outside, waiting, listening. I remember looking at the peephole from across the room and feeling this overwhelming urge to check it. Just one look. That's all it would take. But then, I remembered the man downstairs. Don't look through the peephole. The fact that he sounded genuinely afraid earlier suddenly felt very important. So instead, I backed away from the door, slowly, trying not to make noise. And after another minute or two, I finally heard footsteps outside, very slow footsteps, moving farther down the hallway, then 3 more knocks somewhere in the distance. Another apartment, another stop, another silence. It continued like that for almost 20 minutes. Knocking, walking, waiting. Then eventually, the hallway lights turned back on. I knew because the thin strip of light under my door suddenly returned. And just like that, the building sounded normal again. Somebody flushed a toilet upstairs. A TV turned on somewhere nearby. I even heard a couple arguing faintly through the walls, like whatever had just happened was over. I barely slept that night, and the next morning, nobody mentioned anything. Not the people in the hallway, not the landlord, nobody. It was like the entire building had silently agreed to pretend nothing happened after midnight. That bothered me more than the knocking itself, because fear spreads fast in apartment buildings. If something weird happens, people talk about it. But here, nothing. No conversations. No complaints. Nothing. That afternoon, I decided to ask the landlord directly. At first, he acted confused, then annoyed. Then, when I mentioned the knocking, his expression changed for half a second, just enough for me to notice. I asked him if someone was going around knocking on doors at night. He immediately shook his head. No. Too fast. Too automatic. I asked him why the hallway lights shut off every night. He claimed it was electrical problems. I asked him why everyone in the building acted terrified after midnight. This time he didn't answer. He just stared at me for a few seconds before saying, "People in this building mind their own business." Then he walked away. That answer stuck with me all day, because it wasn't normal. None of this was normal. That night I started paying attention to the neighbors. Around 11:45 p.m., I noticed people moving quickly through the hallways carrying groceries, laundry, trash bags. Like everyone was trying to finish something before a deadline, and the closer it got to midnight, the stranger people acted. One woman taped something over her peephole before entering her apartment. Another guy practically ran inside after checking the hallway twice. At one point, I even saw an older couple whispering nervously near the elevator. Then exactly at 12:14 a.m., the hallway lights shut off again. At the exact same second, every sound in the building disappeared. No footsteps, no plumbing, no televisions, nothing. And somehow, That silence felt prepared this time, like everybody already knew what was coming. Then came the knocking again. Far away at first, 3 slow knocks. Silence. Then another set. Closer. I sat on my couch listening carefully while trying to convince myself not to panic. But tonight something felt different. The knocking sounded slower, more deliberate. And between the knocks, I started hearing something else. Bare footsteps, not shoes, bare feet against the hallway floor, slowly dragging across the carpet. I felt this horrible tightness in my stomach immediately. Because human footsteps have rhythm, these didn't. The movement outside sounded uneven, almost wrong, like whoever was walking didn't fully understand how humans move. Then suddenly, the footsteps stopped directly outside my apartment again. Complete silence. I stared at the front door while trying to breathe quietly, and then, very softly, something touched the other side of the door. Not knocking, not scratching, just resting there. I could hear the wood creaking slightly under the pressure, like someone was leaning their entire body weight against it. And for some reason, that scared me more than the knocking, because it felt curious, like whatever was outside was trying to hear me breathing inside. Then came the 3 knocks, slow, calm, patient. I shut my eyes and tried to ignore them, but a few seconds later, I heard something that made my blood go cold. A voice, very quiet, almost whispering, right outside my door, and it said my name, very quietly, like it wasn't speaking through air, more like it was speaking through the door itself. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My body felt locked in place, like even breathing would make things worse. The silence after that whisper lasted maybe 5 seconds, maybe less, but it felt longer than anything I've ever experienced. Then, something shifted outside the door, a slow movement, like whoever was there had turned their head slightly, listening for my reaction. I stayed completely still. Even my thoughts felt loud. Then the knocking started again. 3 knocks. Same rhythm. Same patience. But now it didn't feel random anymore. It felt personal. Like it knew exactly which door it was in front of. And it wasn't leaving. I slowly backed away from the door again, step by step, not taking my eyes off it, until I reached the kitchen. That's when I noticed something strange. The hallway light under the door wasn't just on anymore. It was flickering, slowly, like something was interfering with it, and each flicker made the shadow under my door shift slightly, as if something was moving closer. Then the knocking stopped, completely. The silence returned, but this time, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like waiting. I stood in the kitchen for what felt like 10 minutes. No sound. No movement. Nothing. Then I made a mistake. I walked back toward the door. I don't even know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe denial. Maybe I just needed to confirm it was gone. I stood in front of the peephole, and for a moment, everything was still. No sound outside, no movement, just silence. Then I leaned in slightly, not enough to look yet, just close enough to hear. And that's when I noticed something. There was breathing on the other side, slow, controlled, right in front of me. I stepped back immediately. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would give me away. But the breathing didn't stop. It stayed there, right outside the door, like it was waiting for me to make a decision. And then, very gently, I heard a soft tapping on the peephole, not scratching this time, just tapping, light, almost careful, like a finger testing glass. Once, then again, and again, then silence. I don't know how long I stood there. Seconds, minutes. Time didn't feel real anymore. Then I heard something move in the hallway again. Slow footsteps, moving away from my door, then stopping, then turning back, coming closer again. And that's when I heard something worse. Multiple doors in the hallway started opening, one by one, not fully, just slightly, like people were watching, but no one was speaking, no one was reacting, just doors opening in silence, and then closing again, one after another, like the building itself was breathing. Then I heard the whisper again, but this time, it wasn't at my door. It was everywhere, in the hallway, in the walls, even faintly behind me inside the apartment. And all it said was the same thing, my name, over and over. Then suddenly, everything stopped again. No sound, no breathing, no footsteps, just silence. And I thought it was over. I really did. But then I noticed something under my door. A thin line of something dark slowly seeping in from the hallway. And it wasn't shadow. It was moving. The dark line under my door kept spreading. Slowly. Like ink seeping through paper. But it wasn't just spreading across the floor. It was moving upward too, climbing the edges of the door frame, as if the door itself was being erased. I stepped back immediately. My back hit the kitchen counter, and I couldn't stop staring at it, because now I understood something I didn't want to understand. This wasn't someone standing outside my door anymore. This was something that didn't respect the idea of a door at all. The hallway was gone silent again. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing. But the darkness under the door kept growing. Then, the handle moved, just slightly. A small downward press, like someone was testing it, not trying to break in. Testing. I froze, because that felt worse than force. Force means panic. Testing means patience, and patience means it has time. The handle returned to normal, then silence again. For a few seconds I actually thought it might stop, that maybe whatever this was had lost interest. That hope lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the whisper came again, but this time it wasn't saying my name. It said something else, very close, very calm. Right at the door, it said, "You already looked." My stomach dropped instantly, because I hadn't. I never looked through the peephole. I didn't break the rule. I didn't. And then I stopped, because I realized something. The tapping earlier, the breathing, the way it stayed exactly in front of the door for so long. It wasn't waiting for me to open it. It was waiting for me to do something much smaller, something I didn't even consider. I looked at the peephole, just once, from across the room. And in that moment, I saw it. The tiniest reflection change, a faint movement behind the glass, like an eye shifting to match mine. But I hadn't even been looking through it. It was looking out, waiting for me to notice it noticing me. The whisper came again, but now it was inside the apartment, not outside, not through the door, inside the sound itself. It said, "Now you're part of the building." The hallway lights outside suddenly turned on, for the first time that night, but it didn't feel like relief. It felt like exposure, because now I could see the hallway clearly through the cracks. Every door was open, every single one, and inside each doorway, there was something standing just out of sight, watching, waiting, not moving, not leaving. Then all at once, every apartment door in the hallway closed, one after another. Perfect synchronization, like something had finished counting. And then, my door unlocked itself, slowly, with a clean metallic click. I didn't move. I couldn't. The handle turned down on its own. The door opened a few centimeters, and cold air from the hallway spilled inside. I finally saw what was out there. Nothing fully human. Nothing fully wrong either. Just presence. Like the shape of a person that your brain refuses to complete. And in that gap where a face should have been, there was only darkness. But that darkness was focused on me. And then it spoke one last time. Not from outside. Not from inside. Everywhere at once. And it said, "Next night, you knock." The door closed, and the hallway lights went out. Completely. I moved out the next morning. But that wasn't the end. Because when I asked the landlord for my deposit back, he didn't ask why I was leaving. He just looked tired and said, "You lasted longer than most." And now I understand the rule. It was never about looking. It was about being noticed. And the worst part is, sometimes I still hear knocking. Not from the hallway, not from outside, from places I haven't entered yet.